Okay, and our session today is with Quirina Geary, and this is our fifth session, I think, of the Breath of Life 2021 Symposium, our alternative of online presentations since we could not hold our Breath of Life Institute in person this year. So I'm your host today, Carly Tex, ICL's Executive Director, and joining me as co-host is our program assistant, Carmen Moreno. And our chat box is open. So if you look at the lower part of your screen, you can see the chat icon. So feel free to share in the chat a greeting of your language and a brief introduction of yourself. In today's session, we have one of our ICL's board of directors, Quirina Geary. She is Tamien and Mutsun Ohlone and current chairwoman for the Tamien Nation. Chairwoman Geary is a cultural practitioner with over 26 years of experience in language revitalization. She has co-authored several academic publications, including a 600-page Mutsun to English dictionary. She has given talks advocating for Native language preservation, social justice, and institutional reform to better serve and to include tribal communities in the decision-making processes. Chairwoman Geary's greatest accomplishment is raising her 10 children with California Indian values, language, and cultures. And we are so honored to have Quirina here today with us. So Quirina, when you're ready, unmute yourself and take it away.
Okay, hinkakte makam and kanrakat Quirina Geary, kusimikas mes mishte. Hi everybody. It's great to be here. I appreciate everybody's time, taking the time out of their day to listen to me speak today. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about language revitalization and how to preserve and protect your work. So I'll briefly go over, just introduce myself, why language is important, talk a little bit about the Mutsun language project and how to preserve your work and how to protect it. So I am an enrolled citizen of Tamien Nation, but I also have Mutsun heritage. I'm also on the board of directors for ICLs, the Advocates for California Language Survival. And I'm also a language learner and teacher of 26 years. I'm a cultural practitioner, and I'm a mother of 10 and a grandmother of 6. So I always like to start off talking about why language is important. And it's important for several reasons. And one of them is identity, right? It's so tightly knit with our identity, as well as there's also health benefits. And so there have been studies done where they believe that 90% of the world's languages, which is 7,000 languages, will sleep or be endangered by the end of the century. They expected that Chinese, Spanish, and English will be the dominant global language. And so that's one of the reasons why our languages are so important. Linguists Ken Hale, would say loss of linguistic diversity is loss of intellectual diversity. And so, language, it incorporates, knowledge and values of a speech community. And so there's things that we say in our languages that it's a worldview, a way of thinking. And so in Mutsun in particular, I could say, I can introduce myself, right? And if I introduce myself, I have to tell you what village I come from. And so one of the villages I come from is Ritoksi, so I can say Ritoksi Takawas. But I could never say, because I don't live in my homeland, I live somewhere else. I live up, my husband's community up at Ilem. I could never say Ilem Takwas, because I'm not of Ilem. I'm from Ilem. I could say Ilem Taktum, but I could never say Ilem Takwas. And so when I say, when I come from my village, it's actually saying that I'm not only of the village, I am the village, right? I'm of the land. There's no separation. So it's something that we're always going to, be together. So I am the land. Another way is like to say thank you. In English, we just like throw it away, throw it around, right? We say thank you for everything, right? To say it in Mutsun, you would say "Shurururi toksitkawas." So you would say blessings from my village. So it's a true blessing in the sense of that you're sending blessings from your entire village. So we represent our village everywhere we go and everywhere. In everything that we do. So we always have to present ourselves in a good way, because we don't just represent ourselves, but represent our people. And so our languages have cultural context and worldview, how we see the world, and it shows in our language. So language is powerful. It's not just used for communication, but we use it, right, to transfer cultural knowledge. Like I mentioned, it's our worldview, and you can also use it. It's always can be medicine or a weapon. So we literally, as Indian people, use it as medicine. It's in our songs, right? It's in our prayers. And for us, those things are our medicine. And then you can also use it as a weapon, right? You can literally hurt somebody, with your language, but you can also, just speaking to somebody, talking about them in a bad way, you can change the way that they feel. It changes people. So also ourselves, how we speak to ourselves, right? We can, say, okay, I feel good, I did a good job, or really down ourselves about how we did. And that self-talk is really powerful in all sense. And that, even though we're not speaking it, it's still language in our head. So, it's really important that we watch how we speak to each other and even to ourselves. And one always thing that I always think about is like the Sixth Amendment, right? We have a right to counsel for a out-of-court interpreter. So if you ever get in trouble, just say you need an interpreter. If you need more time, say you need an interpreter, and speak your native language, and they'll have to try to find somebody who speaks your language. So maybe it'll get you out of trouble or something. So, so language, can be used for several things. So, language loss is a social justice issue. It really is. And, when you lose a language, it causes, historical trauma and, leads to health disparities. And so, and that all begins with loss of land, right? As Indigenous people, we lost our land. We were forced, forced assimilation and language termination, right? We weren't allowed to speak our languages. And that causes the historical trauma. And then you have a sense of hopelessness, right? And then that, goes into poor health, shorter lifespan. And, studies have been done that Native American disabilities is 15%. It's almost 25% higher, than whites. And so it really is an issue. And using language, they're starting to produce studies that show there are some health benefits. And so it all begins, like we're hoping that someday, right, we'll have that return of land, because return of land will also provide a space to restore community speakers. And so for my community, we don't have land. And so we live in a scattered community. In order for us to really build language and to create that strong community, we need land to live in a central location. So we have that social interaction with each other, because even though we continue to teach language, we use Zoom, we use all these, we use this technology, but we won't learn language that way. Unfortunately, it will spark interest. It'll, but to really, you have to use it. You have to use it at home. You have to use it within your community. It's enabled to do that. Tribes need their land back. And so in order to, once that happens, then we'd be able to provide that space. That space will be there to be able to speak with each other, to live in our language. Right. So that also, once you, learn language and you have that sense of community, it reinforces identity, right? Everybody needs a sense of belonging. And once you have that sense of belonging, it increases happiness, mental and physical health, and it also will, increases longevity, will live longer. So language is part of that, and it's really important. And so there's also been studies that talk about the other health advantages, and they say Indigenous groups in British Columbia, where 50% of the community is conversationally fluent, youth suicides were down 1/6 less than indigenous bands who are less fluent. So they're starting to look at how things correlate, how things are working together as far as language is concerned. So I want to talk a little bit about the Mutsun Language Project. And so Mutsun is considered a Coast-Noan or Ohlone language. Coast-Noan just means coastal people or coastal dwellers. And Ohlone was coined by anthropologists, and there's two theories. One is that it was named after the Olyon tribe or village area, and the second one, someone said that they think it means Westerner in Miwok, and which one it is, I have no idea, but there really is no Ohlone tribe. People, it gets confusing for, outside for the public. There might be somebody from way down south who says, oh, I'm Ohlone, and they may be way up north. And so they're like, oh, well, come and do an opening or a land acknowledgement. And those kinds of things are really dangerous because when those types of things happen, then it causes erasure for the homeland people. So it's really, really important that people know and understand that there's different dynamics. So within, this area that they named us is because our languages were related, right? We have 8 different languages. There's some linguists who argue that the 3 up on above on the top, there's Ramaytush, Chochenyo, and Tamien. I think maybe they're dialects, but there's very scant information on both Ramaytush and Tamien, and I don't know how well it's actually been documented. But to go back, there's eight different languages is what most of the data most of the research has said. So historically, tribes were politically autonomous and we controlled specific lands, right? So there's this idea that Native people didn't control lands, right? We didn't own lands. So we probably didn't own them in the sense of, what our modern society thinks of ownership, but we definitely controlled particular lands. And today, our tribes are distinct politically. We have different social structure, culture, religion, and value system. And so we are so different now than we have ever been. And so, so when you're using the term Ohlone, like really try to find out which, tribe you're talking about or which language group that they come from, because we are very, very different. And so for Mutsun, our language, our main source was from John B. Betty Harrington. So he worked with our last fluent speaker, Ascension Lorazano. And she passed away in 1930. And so before we started to revitalize the language, it had been sleeping for like 70 years at least. And so it was a trek. It's been a long haul. It's been really, it's been a challenge. Other sources that we have were Arroyo de la Cuesta. He was a priest at Mission San Juan Bautista, and he learned the language, living there, with a lot of our ancestors. And then John Alden Mason, he actually interviewed my grandmother in 1916 and got maybe 4 or 5 pages of some language work with her there. And so when I was a young woman, my sister and I, were interested in language, and we'd run around all over the place and try to find out more information about language. And everywhere we would go, people would say like, oh, you mean Ohlone? And at that time we were like, who's Ohlone? Like we didn't know, we had never really heard that term. And they're like, oh, they're all dead. They're extinct. And, being who me and my sister were at that time, we were really quiet, like, oh, okay. But we're thinking to ourselves, right? There's hundreds of us that live in the San Joaquin Valley now. But that's just the perspective that people had in the early 90s. And so, we hunted around, we got invited to, I think it was the Second Language of Life conference, and it was hosted by IGLS, which back then I believe was called, was with a group, Native California Network, not too sure about how the logistics went with that, but later became Advocates for California Language Survival. And my sister and I attended the first Breath of Life workshop, now it's called Institute, in 1996. So during that time, it was a small group. I want to say maybe 15 of us. We were paired with a linguistic partner. They gave us a crash course in linguistics, showed us how to do archival research. And we learned to work with our materials, be able to read our materials. And by the end of the week, we had to have a language project. And I think what my sister's writing on the board there was some Mason work that we had found. And yeah, it was really, we can't tell you how much it meant to us to be able to see the language, because before this, we didn't know a word in our language, not one word. We had never seen any documentation or anything. So this program is really what kicked us off. It really allowed us to get things, up and going, up and running. So after working with, the linguists, so I worked with Natasha Warner. At the time, she was a grad student. Now she's the head of her department at the University of Arizona. And I always joke and I tell people, I grew up with her. I feel like I grew up with her. We've known each other for so long. And so working with her and, with all the material that we were finding, I got together with some other community members, and we created a language committee. And the language committee, we wanted to be able to use to be able to make decisions on the language, right? I just didn't want it to be me or my family. We wanted to make sure we included other people in the decision-making processes. So we started language classes. We made, we worked on curriculum. And we used this committee and the committee members, they did outreach. And as we were developing, our dictionary, we tested the orthography, we changed it a few times. We made sure that it was usable. We make sure our committee had different educational backgrounds. We had different ages. We had teenagers to 60, 70-year-olds. We really wanted to make sure that we had an array of different views to make sure that what we were doing was workable for the community. And then we also created like really fun words, but we made sure as we were doing that they were culturally appropriate, structurally, appropriate, and in order to use our language, in today's society. So we decided, who's going to do what role, right? That was really important in the beginning. And so we decided we were going to put people where their expertise was. And so the linguists, they analyzed the data, they developed the database, and they consulted with grammar. So anytime we needed or we weren't sure about something, we'd always kick it back to them, and then they would, give us some advice. And sometimes we didn't always take their advice, and we thought, oh, maybe it should say like this. And that's just, sometimes we feel like cultural content kind of might change things a little bit. But for the most part, I got to say, we're very, very lucky with Natasha being able to work with her, as much as we have. We work well together, and as well as Lenica. So the community roles where we did most of the research, we did most of the digging, finding the materials. We developed the curriculum. We'd always kick it back, like I said, to the linguist to make sure it was grammatically correct, and then we implemented it. So we were the ones who were out in the community, wanted to make sure that the community, if they saw us up there, and they knew we can do this, then they can do it too. So we wanted to make sure that it was somebody within our own community that was teaching. We felt that was really important. And so finally, after many years in 2016, the dictionary was finally published. And this was after, many, many years of free, dedicated time from linguists and students who were, just, dedicated. I know a lot of the work that was done was voluntary, was volunteered, a lot of work to make this happen wasn't paid. And so finally, 2016, we published it. We published it open access, and it's actually available to anybody online. If you just type in Mutsun dictionary, it should pop up and anybody can download it. And then a year later in 2017, we had a hard copy printed, and we had a distribution kind of a meal, a feast, and we fed everybody. We passed out the dictionaries and, taught the community how to look up words, and then also how it worked on a little bit of pronunciation. And we had ages from range, 2 to 70. I want to say maybe 40 or so people showed up. Oh no, she has 80. Okay, maybe it was 80. I can't remember, but it's been a while. But no, it was a great event. And what I thought was really, really interesting is that sometimes we think technology is the answer, right? So we published this dictionary in 2016, a year before the print copy came out, and hardly anybody was using it. And it wasn't a PDF, so sometimes that makes it a challenge to do searches. But I really anticipated more people using the online version, and that really wasn't the case. It was something about having a hard copy that people were able to touch and feel that that they needed. And it also gave them a sense of pride. You see smiles throughout the place, and it was great. It was good to finally to see that happen. And I know Natasha had to been excited to finally wrap that up. And we're still working on it, by the way. There'll probably be we found more material or more data. So unfortunately, it'll constantly, and as language is living, breathing, it evolves. And so it's more things are going to happen. It's going to be built on anyway. So I want to talk a little bit about, preservation, right? Preserving your work. Excuse the typo. I just had part of this conversation with Natasha yesterday, and we talked about how important it is to back up, your materials. So digitize your materials, keep lots and lots of copies. Like one of my computers just crashed, a couple of months ago. So it happens, right? Put things on drives, put things in the cloud, whatever you can do is going to safeguard the work that you've done. Consider archiving them with an institution that you trust. So talk to other people, find out who has worked with what, archive and how they were treated, and if they kept the promises that they were going to keep with the materials, definitely look into it. Look at the back, look at the background, who's running it, and find out what their policies are and what you can do to protect your work, whatever stipulation you want to put on it, and whether the institution is willing to abide by that. If you're comfortable with publishing open access, it makes your work widely available, right? It's out there. And some tribes aren't comfortable with that. They feel like their language is sacred and it's only for their community. Everybody has their own perspective about how much or who should have access, who can have access. And for myself, I'd worked on the language for a long time, but I'd seen the change in leadership and the different perspectives on ownership and especially with language. And we just made a decision and say, what, we need to leave it open access, because we wanted to make sure that that our community will always have access regardless of who's in office and who's not, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we felt that was really important. Save your documents in a format that's going to be around for a while. And I'm not a techie person, so I had to ask Natasha this question, and she said XML and PDF files, and I looked it up, and they're saying that those are the best way to save your documentation, to download it into those types of files. Those will be around for a while. So that's important to do, because I have old computers that I can't even power up anymore, or even if I can't open files. And yeah, it's a challenge, and it's something you have to constantly be mindful of. So the next thing is be mindful the technology changes rapidly, and you need to update formats when needed. And sometimes we have computers and thinking the last, a while, even though they function, they may not function properly after so much time. They say about 5 years, your computer starts to get kind of wonky, and there's going to be things that are going to happen, and you could lose some really important data. And so that's important, to do, to make sure that you update it. Your not just your files, but your computers, that they're not going to run forever. Don't run it till the wheels fall off, because then you'll be in trouble. And then a reminder that CDs, if they're in good, ideal conditions, they only last like 30 years. I was reading something a while back and it said 100 years, but they're saying no, they're saying like 30 years. And so for people like me who have stuff on CDs, I actually even still have floppies somewhere, but I just, we tried to open them. We couldn't even open them anymore. So yes, try to update them. And that those 30 years are coming up for those CDs. So try to do that. So, so protecting your work. So this is just, so this part it has a lot to do with, things that I've learned along the way, things that I, kind of researched, as well as experience, right? My experience, and well as, my husband also works on his language. And so, between both of us, we're always talking about, experience of working with, within our community and working outside of our community. And there's different things that have come along the way. I'm sure there's a whole lot of different scenarios, but this is coming from things that we experienced, or friends or other people in our community that have experienced. So each community has different dynamics, value systems, and available resources. So some communities will have speakers, others will be like our community that only has archival material. And so your language program may or may not be supported by tribal leadership. And it may flip-flop back and forth depending on who's in office at the time, right? And you may or may not be enrolled in an organized tribe or recognized tribe, right? You might just be somebody who's not involved with any, organization or anything at all. You might just be somebody who wants to learn your language. And oftentimes language work is a sole effort, and or with a small team of community members. And so that's something that I see really often. And so, so some of the things that I've learned, that if you're an employee for a tribe or a company and your work is part of your duties as authors, of work, it's automatic. Your work is automatically transferred to the company, and it's called work made for hire. So if someone hired me and I'm working for my tribe or a different company, and I work in a language program and I'm developing all of these materials, and maybe it's stuff that no one's helping me with, and I'm doing it all on my own, but I'm doing it under this contract for work, then everything that I'm doing belongs to the company. Like, I have no rights to that work. That's theirs. They can do whatever they want with that work. But if you're an independent contractor, then you retain your intellectual property rights. So unless there's a written agreement, that it's your work. And so one example is that I was hired by a tribal nonprofit, and they said, "Hey, can you come and teach language class for this camp out?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And so I went and I looked at this contract, and I'm reading it, and I'm one of those people, like, contracts, like, I'll read everything. And I read the fine print, and it basically said everything that I was going to teach there or produce for them there was going to be the intellectual property rights of that organization. And I was like, no. So I said, well, you're going to have to look for good luck finding somebody else, or, or you need to change it. And they just basically say, change it any way you want, and we'll take it. And I said, okay. So because the work that's been done is the work that has been done without this particular organization. And so to give up those rights was something that was not going to happen. So be really, really careful, even if you're a contractor. So you can always protect your work if it's in written form. You don't have to file anything or do anything. All you have to do is put this symbol, right? This little C symbol, the year it was published, your author's name, and you can, or you don't have to, but you can write all rights reserved if you want. So there's an example at the bottom that you can put on the bottom of your documents, or whatever it is, just to protect them. And then another thing is, like, when you work with linguists, get to know the linguists, get to know them, consider who you're working with and what is their reputation. So ask around, find out what other groups that they worked with, and find out, some linguists in certain communities don't work well together, others do. It just depends. And if you're not sure, consider it an MOU. I know when you're working, like, in the field, they might require an IRB, but if it's something like language revitalization work and you're working together collaboratively on a particular project, that's not the case. So so I would consider an MOU if you're not too sure, or if it's student or that kind of thing. I mean, definitely do something like that, something in writing that protects your work, where the work that they're doing parallels with what the community needs. Oftentimes academics will come, and this is all fields, will come in, to a community, kind of extract, right? They'll learn what they can, they'll extract what they can, and then they're off and running, right? And then those documents about your grandmother and grandfather, aunts and uncles, they're gone, right? And so now it's their intellectual property, right? The students, like, you don't own it anymore, it's gone. And legally, that's the case. And, I know sometimes you want to say, well, it's our intellectual property rights, it's or whatever, but by law, they don't care. It's theirs. So you want something in writing, you want to make it very clear who you're working with, and to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And when they do publish something, say, you know what, we want to see it. We want to see before you publish, screen what they're writing about you. Oftentimes they'll write something and it's not true, or it's off, and maybe, there's a lot of miscommunication, right? We come from different communities, different, worldviews and value systems. And don't be afraid to say, before you publish that, I want to take a look at it. Or you publish something that's not true, you need to retract it somewhere. There have been issues that I had, not necessarily with somebody I worked closely with, but someone who wrote about me and disparaged my character, and their facts were wrong. And it was just like, and it's just like, there's not really much you can do about it. When you're working with this kind of work, I mean, you can call them on it and hopefully they'll do the right thing. But so I would be very careful about, making sure you're comfortable, but then nothing is ever guaranteed either. And so in this other case where I wasn't working with this person, so I would be, but it's okay. It's okay to ask. So, and then it's your work too. So if you're working, with academics, linguists, whatever field you're working in, and you're working together collaboratively, and someone's going to publish a paper about the work you do together. Well, that's the work you did together, and that's also your work. And so we've been really lucky working, with linguists they give us co-authorship, because this doesn't only just give you credit, right? It guarantees that you have future access and a future use to use that material for something else. And there's some examples that I'll give in a minute here. Okay. Oh, well, I guess. So let me go back. I'm going to go back one. But there was another slide there. Okay. So there was and I'm just going to use, my experience. And I wanted to create, good tribal relations with a tribal group. And they said, hey, can you, I know you translated, you and your sister translated this story. Can we use it, for this article? We really need the kind of publicity. It'll help us. And I didn't like the idea, but I felt pressured, and I was like, okay. So we went ahead and we worked in Bay Nature magazine, did this article, right? And so they put our story out there with the translation and my voice recording it. And, I don't know, I don't know. I wasn't familiar with this online process, and this magazine, you're thinking, oh, 1 month subscription, right? It'll be gone. And unfortunately, it stayed there for 5 years, and I didn't know until recently. And another, I think it was San Jose State, one professor decided, well, she runs a class with about native language revitalization. And so her students extracted the story with everything, with the verbiage. They did a video that was really culturally inappropriate. It was like Plains Indian people, and and it was culturally inappropriate, and on their and they put it on YouTube. And the caption says, like, oh, we're helping to revitalize the Mutsun language. And Al Jazeera did like a segment on it. And I, and I immediately, contacted them, saying, you need to remove it. I called YouTube. YouTube took it off. They kept trying to put it back on. And unfortunately, the professor thought what she did was okay and that I was the bad guy. And so it doesn't matter. She can think what she wants. I had it removed. And that's what we have to be careful with, because what we put out there will be out there for a long time, and it will be misused, even though it is an infringement on our copyrights. It's bound to happen. And what I did find out is that when you do upload something online, the minute you save, like even on your computer, you save a photo to your computer, that belongs to you. If you took the photo, right? If anything you write that's on your computer, that belongs to you, copyrighted the minute you type it. So anything we upload, it automatically belongs to us. You don't have to put a little C symbol. It's our rights and it's our copyrights. But unfortunately, in this day and age, people do, abuse that. But at the same time, I hate to say it, I catch myself doing that too. And I was like, oh no, I need to make sure I cite this, or make sure I put the website, or say where I got it from. But those are things to kind of be, mindful of. And then also, a lot of these old time, linguists who worked with our relatives, some time ago. I know there's a linguist, McClendon, she worked with the Eastern Pomo. From what I understand, they still don't have all that work that she's done, all the recordings, everything else. And those kinds of things in this day and age shouldn't be happening. And so if anybody knows McClendon, tell her to give her the stuff back to the Eastern Pomo, because that belongs to them. And so, and even, I know there's one instance that, my husband's community up here at ELM invited a linguist, in, and she worked with the community really well. And the next thing 5 years later, they see something published, and she's detailing cultural information about the ceremonies, about roundhouse ceremonies. And so, we need better communication. We need to work better. We need a better understanding. And as Indian people, we need to not be afraid or be ashamed to say, hey, what are you going to use this for? Like, I want it in writing, or, whatever you're feeling. If your gut's telling you like, oh, this something doesn't feel right, then say it. And a lot of times it's from the academic point, from what I understand, it's always been a particular way, and things are starting to change now. You see that movement, you see that change. But not everybody's there yet. And so it's okay to stand up for your community, to stand up for your language. And one community might have a different perspective than another, and that's okay. We're all in a different place at different times. And, we should support one another, not be judgmental to one another. So like, I'm more freely sharing our information, but I'm in a different place than I was 15, 20 years ago. And so things change over time, and people change, and communities change. And so, so other than that, so just be aware of, what the goals of the community are. So I try not to think of myself, I try to input from the community and how they can be achieved. And then this way, the relationship remains the same inside and outside the community with the people that you're working with. And then, that's all we can hope for, is is really just do our best, but input from our community members is really important to have all the time. So I'm not sure how I am on time.
You're doing good. If you wanted to continue, you could, while we collect some questions, if you have anything else you want to add. Or we can go straight into the Q&A. We're good with that too.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I was behind.
No, you're doing good.
It's my clock. Yeah, so I guess the main thing is when just protecting your work. It's okay to protect it, right? It's okay to let outsiders know, like, hey, our people want an MOU, right? We want this. We want this document. And I know it's hard because sometimes we don't know how, like, I don't know how to drop an MOU, right? I probably would go to somebody else, and another, somebody else doing community work, and ask them, hey, do you have anything, do you have anything that we can use as a template, to use. But for myself, I have been really, I gotta say, working with, Natasha and Lineker, for all these years. We haven't had really, any of these issues. We've had a couple of conversations, and and if there was something we didn't see eye to eye on, it was something that we're coming from two different perspectives. And so the key is communication, right? And then seeing each other's, perspective. And then in the end, it's, we're the community. We've always, they've always been gracious and gave us our way. Like we always, in the end, ended up, with, geared more towards what the community, felt was appropriate. And that's how it should be. So I don't have anything else to add, unless, I don't know, I'm curious if there's anybody out there who has had any, experiences or any other, ideas about, protecting and preserving work. I mean, I can only, talk about my own, experiences, but I'm sure other people have had the same or something similar.
So we have some comments coming up in the chat from Natasha Warner herself. Noted that she's worked on a couple of MOUs with tribes in Arizona. Universities are used to doing MOUs, so they won't be surprised if you ask for one. We have an article from Justin that addresses some of these issues as well, an article by Wesley Leonard. We have a question from William. Okay, so the question is, Mark Okrand, known for having invented the Klingon language, wrote a dissertation on the Mutsun language, UC Berkeley, based on Harrington notes. Was his dissertation useful for your work?
Yeah, it was one of it was like the foundation of our work, especially in the beginning.
I have a follow-up question for you. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing your insight. I think this was very informational presentation. This is a very important issue for anyone who's creating language content, teaching materials, content that you're producing online for your social media. So I think there are a lot of people out there who could learn from this. So I want to just show appreciation for you. So if everybody can just share an emoji or a little round of applause to Quirina. Thank you for her time today. And I have a follow-up question while we're waiting for some more cues to come in. I just would like to know your program or your committee work, your language work in general. What could people do to support your work? And is the program in need of additional support, whether it's financial volunteers and so on, outreach? If people, heard your story today and wanted to help out, what could they do?
We're actually working with the National Breath of Life, with Daryl Baldwin of the Miamia tribe, and they have this it's this new online platform that we're eventually going to need help with people inputting data into this new platform. So it will be an online, basically it's not just a dictionary, but also more to analyze. So you'll be able to go online, look up a word, see, several tokens of the word in a sentence, as well as being able to hear it and then to view the original source. So I guess it's geared more towards like language teachers, but it's easy enough for any community member to use. And so one thing would be funding, right? Because we're going to have to hire people to do that, as well as volunteers also to help us do that, because we would actually like to hire community members to record record the sentences, record the words for this dictionary. And as Indian people, we've always done things for free, and we think it's important that we compensate our community for their time. And so one thing would be funding. And so we actually have a donations page on, it's just tamien.org, TAMIN.org. And there's different campaigns there, including language. So it'll help us in that aspect. And then linguists or students or anybody who is interested in participating, we're going to need some help once we get the ball rolling on this new program.
And Quirina, a follow-up question to the program and to your work in general. What would you hope for as the future of your work?
I don't know it's so much the future of my work as it is for the people. I really, in order for our language, for any of the work that we've done, for it to really to stick, right, for people to actually be able to use it in a way that's going to create speakers, is that we have to live in a community, right? In order to do that, we need our land back. And so our community can live together in order to, talk to each other in a social, setting. We're doing our best. We're using, the resources that we can, via Zoom, and, we do other online, platform, like self-directed learning. But we're just not going to create speakers that way. We really need to live together in our community. So we need to build our community again. In order to do that, we need our land back.
Great, thank you. I want to invite a question. I would like to invite Sherry Tatch to unmute yourself and jump in with your question or comment.
Hi, everybody. Sherry. One of the ways that this is being dealt with for me, so I'm currently writing a Nisan on practical grammar, and I'm doing that under a contract with Shingle Springs Rancheria. So the way it's being handled, or is being handled, is that we both hold copyright together equally. And there are conditions within the contract that says that either one of us can take that finished product and distribute it to other Nisenan people that are not state or federally recognized, so that we can disseminate it. And so, and it's an agreement that that's the way it's being dealt with. So it's being done for the community and the language program there, but it also, I can tell them I'm going to make copies and turn it over to another group of people that are Nisenan speaking people, so that they can have that too. So it is both them sharing as a tribe to other Nisenan people, and me as the person who is doing the work, but it is held jointly. So if we were to go and say we want to publish it, and you can buy it on Amazon, let's pretend, I don't think that's ever going to happen, but we have to both come into agreement that that's what we want this thing to become. Because it's been, it's intended for community, it's intended for people to learn certain aspects about their language, right? So that's just one approach. The other approach with older work that I've done, and this has happened both at Tuolumne and Shingle Springs and Nevada City, is that yes, the piece of paper on all the lesson plans and all the work has my name and copyright on it. But at the same time, it is for their use forever. So someone in that community can take that set of lesson plans and teach from that lesson plan and distribute it to the people in the classroom. And even though it only has my name on it because we have found other consultants taking the work and getting paid to teach something that they didn't do. Right? So that was a way to kind of protect the work I do, but also protect the community in which it's being done for. So it's almost like and we have these kind of discussions. If you're doing it with a good heart to teach people the language, you use everything that I've made. So that's been my approach to it as someone coming from the outside into a community.
I think that's a great example. You know, every community is going to have something different, and I think that's a good way of sharing it, but still wanting to keep it within their community. But they're not letting, but they're including people who are non-tribal members of that specific tribe. I think it's great that's happening. One thing I did want to mention is that I know. So I asked him permission. He said, yeah, I can use this example. So, you know, my husband, Robert, he's from Elam, he's Southeastern Pomo, and him and his aunt worked with in a field methods class at UC Berkeley. And the students, you know, kind of, you know, took some data from them. And then one of those students created an online dictionary. And this online dictionary actually used a different orthography than the community was actually using. And so when he did this online dictionary, it's not useful to the community. Nobody used it. They still, I don't know if it's still up, but nobody was using it. And so I think it's important that they work with the community because, you know, you have the privilege of learning, you know, this language from these people. You can't get, a lot of times you can't get this information from anybody else in the world, right? Only these few community members have it. And at least, you know, do something that parallels where, yeah, it helps you, but it also gives back to them, right? Work can be parallel to benefit both parties. And what's interesting is that when it went up, so, you know, Robert's committee said, well, hey, we want to, because this is, you know, him and his aunt's information anyway, that they got from them. They want to use it and change the orthography so it's useful to them. Well, they had to get permission from, you know, this student who's not a student anymore, but in order to use their own work, right? So it basically changed formats to something else. Now this other person took ownership of it. And so now they weren't able to extract it and to use that direct work. And so, so those are things to think about when those kinds of things happen. So, you know, like I said, you know, maybe, you know, creating those MOUs or, I don't know, somehow making some kind of agreement saying, okay, if you're going to work with us, we're going to work together and we're going to have full access to whatever it is you do or create. Yeah, you can use it to help you with your tenure or your, you know, whatever, to get into wherever you want to go. But at the same time, the community should have access to everything that's done, including field notes, and they should be able to review things that are published before they're published to make sure that they're accurate, because these are things that are published, put in print, and then they become true. And so, so yeah, so it should be something, Indian people are, we like to, it's reciprocity, right? We always give back, so outside communities need to understand when they're coming in and wanting to work with Native communities, it goes both ways, right? It's not just taking and doing what, to get noticed or publish your papers. You need to give back. And so that needs to be part of the process as well. So thank you, Sherry, for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right, any other comments? Okay, I'm not seeing anything.
Justin said, do you have any advice or suggestions for younger students, Native and non-Native, in the field of linguistics and things they should be thinking about as they move through their program and training? So just community consent, right? Informed consent. So if you want to work on a language, contact the community. And get their blessing. You may not always get an okay, but for the most part, I think most communities are open to it. And whatever you develop, if it's for a project, send it to them, and allow them to use it. Let it be for something, not just for you, to get a good grade or for the next step. Make it useful for the community, because without them, you wouldn't have been able to do your project, right? So just think it's important to give back as well. So contact the community, get permission and consent, and then pass along whatever you developed to them. And honestly, I think there should be some kind of like, cultural sensitivity and ethics class for students and that are, whether they're going into anthropology or linguistics, like there should be a mandatory, course that they take that, teaches them, how to work with communities, right? And what's ethical, whether it's legal or not legal or, whatever, a lot of times they'll say, well, I don't have to, right? It's not a law, or it doesn't matter. There's, community, we have our own, protocols, our own, laws, get to, talk to whatever university is in the area, talk to, the local people and even, other communities and talk to them about the issues that they have and try to correct those things, because there's a lot of animosity. A lot of tribes, things are getting better, but a lot of tribes are afraid to let outsiders come in because there's that trust. There's no trust. There's been violations of trust in the past. And so, having some type of course or something, sensitivity course, because even when you're working with especially elders, when you go into their home, there's things that you're supposed to do. Like you come in, you better bring like my husband always bring a peach pie to his uncle. Like you better bring something if you're going to come. And then if you're going to be there, interview them or whatever you're going to do, if you have to go and break, for lunch or whatever, come back and either invite them or bring them back something. And then also remember, a lot of, especially, our elders, they have, diabetes, they have other things. So don't work them to death, work them, pay attention to how they're looking, how they're feeling, and give them a break, those kinds of things are really important when you work with Native communities. People don't think about those things, but those things are really important. So yeah, there needs to be some type of, cultural sensitivity or course, for all linguistic and anthropology students.
I'd like to invite, yes, food is always good. I just commented that I used to take cookies or lunch to my elders because I knew we were going to be there for a while. And so if we were going to take a break, might as well have something to snack on. I would like to invite Patricia Shaw to jump in with your question.
Hi, I just wanted to say thanks so much, Quirina, for all your comments. It's really wonderful. I wish that there could be a video of this presentation for us to make available to students, for example, because the situation that I'm in and have been for over 20 years is because we are on traditional Musqueam, unceded territory, the university has collaborated with the Musqueam Indian Band to engage in language reclamation and bringing the language back. There are no longer any active first language speakers. So it is a revitalization program in that sense. But the community, as many communities have been very reluctant to share the language and share the knowledge and the traditions and the culture that's embedded in the language with others unless it's going to be respectfully treated. And as you say, reciprocity is so important, and traditionally generosity is so important as well. But on the other hand, there have been so many cases of breaches of trust, and things may be changing, and it's good to identify ethics and protocols. But what we have found is sometimes there have been unfortunate intentional breaches, which has been very upsetting. But sometimes in the case of students, for example, one of the people in the chat mentioned Quizlet. And the students found Quizlet, and so they were putting flashcards on Quizlet and putting other things on Quizlet, unaware of the fine print in Quizlet, which actually says that they do take ownership of the materials and they can use that. The further issue there is that we are in Canada, and the copyright laws in Canada do not extend to the states. And it would have been impossible, the lawyers told us, for us to do anything reasonable in order to regain control of that data. So those are legal things. We actually took the student took all the information down into our knowledge. Nothing happened from that, but it's really difficult to foresee without explicit discussion of these issues like you're bringing forward right now, to foresee what the potential complications of this are. I mean, we've also had requests for somebody wants to name a dog food, and can they use the Hunkaminam word for dog to advertise their dog food and things like that. And these things need oversight, and they need legal oversight, particularly when the language does come into a very public domain, such as a post-secondary university class. So what we did from the outset, we have a memorandum of agreement. There are technical differences between an MOA and an MOU that may be relevant if any of you who are listening are interested in exploring this. But the university and the band decided on this. But we also have a consent form that the students that come into the class, because there are not only Musqueam band members who are in our classes, but there are Indigenous students from many other related languages. There are Indigenous students from other non-related languages who are really interested in learning procedures for how do you learn a language, how do you document a language, how do you develop curriculum for languages that are very much not part of the Indo-European tradition or the tradition of any of the other languages that are taught at the university level. So their input and their participation is phenomenal, but also they take away so much as well. But then the community wants not only control, but information as to how they're going to use the language and the information that they've learned. And that's really a challenging, complex domain. So we have a consent form that we ask students to sign at the beginning of the year. We have one full session dedicated, as you suggested, to ethics and protocols, and what the implications of that are, what the issues that are related to the ethics of language, the privilege of being exposed to a language, the privilege of having the opportunity to interact with community members from the Musqueam community. We've also taught Kwakwala. We do this with all of the courses. We've taught Cree. We've taught a number of different classes under this kind of arrangement. And the ethics and protocols, I think, are really useful because right at the outset, it creates an awareness and it creates a responsibility, and it creates a set of protocols for what if you want to use something that you've learned in this class in another class. So if you want to take it to an anthropology class or a psychology class or something like that, and share with the best of intentions the importance of protocols, the importance of these languages, the importance of respect for the peoples whose languages these are. So I put that out there because it's a very sensitive issue, and it's a very sensitive issue in many ways. But it's something that people can consider as well. It's one more tool in trying to work towards real respect for data sovereignty.
Thank you. You made really good points, and I always love the work you guys do there. It's you always have really good models, and yeah, I'll just next time I see you have to talk and learn more about how you made it happen. But we appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for everything that you've said today, Quirina.
Quirina, do you have responses to the question? There's a couple of questions about the process when someone publishes incorrect or damaging info, how to get it removed or updated. How difficult has that been in your experience?
You know what, for myself, like, there was, this one article, and I basically, just, approached the person and, just let him know that, his information was inaccurate, that he should have done his research. Basically, he listened to gossip, and the gossip is that I was hoarding language. And everything that I have is really, everybody has, especially my community has all of my work. But it named me in the beginning and then was vague later on, but obviously you could tie the two and two together. And it had to do with tribal politics, right? It had to do with tribal politics, and they were upset because I wasn't going to, because I was told specifically not to give the draft dictionary out to the community, until certain people said it was okay. I did it anyway, right? Because what we do is for the people, right? How, because we did it as I'd say it like the individuals, a few people had their hands in creating a lot of this work, without a lot of the support of the tribal government. It changed. We had support in the beginning, then it doesn't. It just depends who's in office, and it's tribal politics, and it's something people really don't like to talk about. It's a hard issue, and it is. It's always difficult, but it's reality. It's our reality, right? Leadership can change, and you're going to be cut off from your community acts. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so, so our, idea to be able to, to make sure everything was freely available, and, that kind of, and then not everything, it was the dictionary, but as far as the other work, that was community, and it's still open to the community. They still have access to everything. But yeah, so, it kind of stirred some stuff in the background, and someone only got one side of the story and published something. And there's, all I can do is I talk to the individual. I think he understood. And by that time, I think he knew what he did was wrong, but it's written, and all I can do is, I guess I can take the time to, do a rebuttal paper. That's about all I can do, but I don't know if anybody else has any other ideas. But it's difficult when something's published, how things are. The written word is the word, so yeah, in that sense, I would try to maybe talk to the person to see if they would retract what they wrote, and if not, then you can, write a rebuttal. But other than that, I don't know what else, can be done, unfortunately.
All right, I think that is about all the time we have for today's symposium. There are a couple other questions in the chat. Maybe you can write a response into the chat to them if you have a moment, or maybe hang on a little bit after, but I would like to wrap up the session today. So again, everyone, let's just share some appreciation for Quirina for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, especially about how you started out at Breath of Life. It must have been exciting to have discovered your first word in your language. And I'm sure others in our audience who have come to Breath of Life have felt that way as well. And I hope that folks listening can learn from your experience and be inspired in their own language work. And for those of us who've been watching your work from start to finish, I mean, you've come a long way. You've come a long way, and I think you should be very proud. So I just appreciate you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And with that, thank you. And I would like to let everyone know that we have 2 more sessions coming up in November. The speakers will be announced soon. And with that, we'll close the session up. Everyone have a good rest of your day. Don't forget to go outside, take a walk, get some air, take a break, and take care of yourself. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.